All right, so I don't have any more people in the waiting room for now, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us in the world, and welcome. My name is Geneva Blackmer. I serve as the Interim Executive Director for the Interfaith Center at Miami University. For those joining us for the first time, the Interfaith Center is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that seeks to foster relationship building, dialogue, and social action. And I'm pleased to welcome you to today's Interfaith panel discussion, Moral Complexity and Discernment in Times of Conflict. The panel today brings together speakers from different traditions to explore how discernment is practiced within their own religious and ethical frameworks in situations of moral complexity. Last month, my co-moderator introduced us to this theme during her presentation on Righteous Tricksters, Rethinking Moral Action in Times of Conflict. Today, we will examine how specific teaching practices and forms of guidance shape responses to uncertainty, competing obligations, and the limits of clear moral judgment. As we begin, I want to acknowledge both the limitations and expectations of our time together. First, none of today's speakers represent the full diversity of their religious traditions, nor the many cultural, ethnic, theological, political, and social perspectives that exist within them. Their reflections are rooted in their own lived experiences, leadership, and personal conviction. Second, rather than seeking definitive answers, the session invites you to consider how discernment might move beyond binary thinking and enable more reflective and responsible engagement in complex and contested contexts. Now, I will turn it over to my co-moderator, Amy, to introduce our panel.
Thank you, Eva. Dr. Jim Newby will offer a Christian perspective today. He holds degrees from Friends University, Earlham School of Religion, William Penn University, and Princeton Theological Seminary. He is the current minister and public friend at Cincinnati Friends Quaker Meeting in Cincinnati, Ohio. Prior to joining the Society of Friends, he served congregations in the United Church of Christ in both Iowa and Minnesota. He has served as the executive director of the Yoke Fellow Institute at Earlham College and a faculty member of the Earlham School of Religion in Richmond, Indiana. Dr. Shakila Ahmad will offer a Muslim perspective today. She is currently the CEO and co-founder of Empowering Spaces. She received an honorary doctorate of humane letters from Mount St. Joseph University. She was a founding board member at the Islamic Center of Greater Cincinnati, becoming the first female across the U.S. to be the president and board chair of such an institution. She has served on numerous boards and received meaningful awards from major organizations for her work to establish and lead cultural competency, education, and building understanding for Muslim Americans, reaching over 100,000 individuals. Rabbi Dr. Gary Zola will offer a Jewish perspective. He is the Executive Director Emeritus of the Jacob Rader Marcus Center of the American Jewish Archives and the Edward M. Ackerman Family Distinguished Professor Emeritus of the American Jewish Experience and Reformed Jewish History at Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in Cincinnati. He served the College Institute, where he received both his rabbinic ordination and his PhD in American Jewish history for more than 4 decades. In 2023, President Joe Biden appointed Dr. Zola to the United States Holocaust Memorial Council, which serves as the governing board of trustees of the United States Holocaust Museum and Memorial in Washington, D.C. And President Barack Obama appointed Dr. Zola on 3 separate occasions to serve as a member of the U.S. Commission for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad. Dr. Raj Bhatnagar will offer a Hindu perspective. He's a professor of computer science at the University of Cincinnati, where he has taught various topics relating to artificial intelligence since 1989. He has long been interested in Indian philosophy and religions. At the local Hindu temple in Cincinnati, he has taught children about Hindu civilizational thought for many years. Before we talk about today's challenges, we are going to open with a question for both Jim and Raj, which begins at a more fundamental level. Every religious tradition holds certain values as sacred, but life often presents situations in which those values don't neatly align, and faithful people are left discerning how to navigate competing moral obligations. When values that your tradition holds deeply, such as justice, compassion, truth, peace, or solidarity, come into tension, how does your tradition guide discernment?
I'm you want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. Um, well, it's wonderful that I'm representing the entire Christian perspective, but that might be a little bit grand for me. I'm a Quaker, a member of the Religious Society of Friends, and I can speak from that tradition, which of course was founded on Christian principles. I would say very simply that we would seek discernment through the Spirit. Those of you who are Trinitarians might understand that Quakers are focused primarily on the Holy Spirit and the belief that there is continuing revelation and that we seek the guidance of the Spirit in all matters. Quaker process is such that we try that to avoid things like 51 to 49 vote, which can be very divisive. We seek spirit. We have clearness committees, what we call clearness committees, which I think is one of the most wonderful things that Quakers can give to the world. And we seek the discernment of the Spirit through those. But it's these are difficult and worrisome times. We're living in a time of tribalism and divisiveness. There are many different views concerning many different cultural activities these days. But we believe that if we cannot unite all opinions, we can certainly unite all hearts. And that is done by Spirit.
Thank you, Jim. Now to you, Raj.
Okay. Yeah, so I will present the views from the Hindu perspective. And Hindu is more from the civilizational perspectives, which has many different worship traditions. So at a much higher full civilizational level, there is no single rule book to say what is right, what is wrong, what is moral, what is immoral. The ultimate criterion is maintaining the harmony in the whole cosmos. And there are rules that govern the functioning of the cosmos, and that should not be disturbed, that should not be made unstable. And the whole cosmos is viewed as a large, complex fabric, and each one of us controls one thread of that fabric. So whatever actions we do at our thread level, that can influence the entire fabric. Okay, so now what is my duty as an individual? What is moral for me? That depends on lots of things. That depends on what is my current situation and role in society. Am I my head of my family? I'm making decisions on behalf of me, my family, or on my community, or on behalf of the whole society, whole country. Uh, and then also what stage of life I am at. The life has been divided into 4 different stages. The early stage, when somebody is supposed to learn, get education and get ready for the economy. So you have moral behaviors for that phase. Then you have the family life. Then you are more responsible for family, earning money, sustaining the family, raising your kids. So that determines what the moral behavior is. And then the third phase is when your kids have grown up, then you are in the phase of you're detaching yourself from the family and business, and you're not in the mode of earning money anymore. You are supposed to be working in the mode of giving back to the society. And in that, there is something which is moral in that third phase, which is not moral in the second phase. And then there's a fourth phase of life where you just take sannyas or renounce the whole world. And then you are creating more knowledge which will benefit the whole cosmos in the long run. So what phase of life you are in, what your current situation is. So it depends on all of them. And then there is also what is called the crisis morality. So that is in the situation of crisis. All these other rules do not apply. And then crisis morality is called apat dharma. It's first I have to survive. If I don't survive, then I'm not going to be able to contribute to this fabric of the cosmos. So if I'm responsible for myself, my survival is more important. Then only then I'll be able to do the moral acts. If I'm responsible for my community, I have to be responsible that my community survives, my country survives. If my country is not going to survive, then I can't do anything moral after that. So there are these exceptions, but they come with a very strict caveat that these are only temporary. These emergency situations cannot be very long. And then if you look at all the literature of Hindu civilization, they always start with a moral dilemma. So the book Bhagavad Gita, that starts with Arjuna. He is the king, and so his cousins, the other side, they have uh, taken the power by unfair means, and they are not fair. They are not good people, and he has to fight a war to get the kingdom for he and his brothers. Now, his dilemma is, should he fight in this war, kill his teachers, his cousins, and his many relatives so that he can get the kingdom, and then, or he should just give up the kingdom because he should not be engaging in violence and killing his cousins. And that's when Krishna advises him that no, for the larger harmony in the cosmos, for a larger scale, for the larger benefit of humanity, and for longer term preservation of harmony in the whole cosmos, it is better that he fights this war now, even if it engages in violence now, and he has to kill his loved ones. So even the war is just if it is for the larger uh, harmony of the universe, for a larger society, and for a longer period. So every all the literature is written always in the form of a question and then explaining how decision should be made.
Thank you, Raj.
Okay, thank you.
On to you, Geneva.
Yeah, thank you both for those thoughtful responses. In a culture that often rewards confidence and quick judgments, we're interested in the opposite virtue. I'm interested in what our traditions teach us about the discipline of not assuming that we have all of the answers. And so, Shakila, this next question is for you. What role do you feel humility, uncertainty, or self-examination play in discernment within your tradition, particularly when people hold deeply opposing convictions?
Thank you, Geneva. I think I have to constantly remind myself, and this was a great lesson, that, Islam historically, traditionally, does not poo-poo or discourage ambiguity, because the world holds a lot of ambiguity, and that, that we are human, we're prone to error, we're prone to making bad judgments, and sometimes it is really absolutely essential that we have the humility, the opposite of arrogance, in order to seek divine guidance, to come out with a decision, or to even sometimes understanding a situation, which, requires much more. Shared principles that guide how Muslims and I should make it clear that this is relevant to me and my practice of my faith, and I don't claim to represent everyone by no means, by any means, but shared principles that guide would be to live including understanding and living by the code of oneness of God, of justice or adil, rahma, compassion. These core values kind of shape my family conduct, my personal conduct, and then community responsibility, as we've kind of touched on. It is essential to seek this discernment, this understanding for ourselves and other situations in the process of, facing complex matters and people with whom we disagree. When faced with opposing convictions, discernment involves thinking and consultation, or shura, istikhara, or seeking God's guidance through prayer, azima, or coming to a decision based on all of the before. And then in the end, you have tawakkul, or you have to have complete trust in God, is that if you've gone through all of those processes, that the decision that you make is something that you want to abide by and live by and be able to be confident is, adhering to what both the faith and humanity calls us to do. I think understanding that we don't have all the answers is not a sign of weak faith in any way, shape, or form. Instead, it acts as safeguards against arrogance, helping believers, helping us to come out with just and compassionate conclusions. So, and giving other people also the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, it's very well known you can't control the actions of others, but you can certainly control the response that you have to their actions.
Thank you, Shakila. That's beautiful. I'm going to hand it over to Amy for the next question.
Thank you, Shakila and Geneva. Much of today's public discourse assumes that moral questions have simple answers. Yet religious traditions have long wrestled with the reality that faithful people are often called to navigate competing goods rather than obvious choices between good and evil. Gary, how does your tradition hold space for moral complexity and nuance when lived reality so often resists simple categories of good and evil?
Well, I'm going to echo what all those who've spoken already have said. All of our religious traditions are very historic and broad and involve the sweep of time and of space, and therefore they themselves are very complex patchworks, mosaics, if you will, of a whole range of traditions. I think anyone who knows anything about Judaism knows just by looking at me that I represent a more liberal wing of the Jewish tradition. And this is true, of course, of all of our religious traditions, the sweep from liberal to more traditional approaches. And yet there are some things that one can say that are broad. And I would say that it's similar to what Shakila said. The ancient tradition of Judaism really does hold the idea that life is filled with ambiguity and uncertainty. I'll just give some examples. Let me just begin by explaining what I hope many people know is that, our understanding of our ancient tradition, we start, of course, with the Bible, with the Hebrew Bible, but long ago, after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, there develops a whole literature, a gigantic literature written by the ancient rabbis. And much of what we talk about in terms of Judaism, what does Judaism say, comes from our study of the rabbis who, in many ways, reflect change from the biblical tradition. I'll just give you one example people might find interesting. Many times you hear quoted that famous line from the Hebrew Bible, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. You know, if somebody pokes out your eye, you're supposed to poke their eye out. Well, the ancient rabbis flip this on its head, and they say, well, that's not at all that's a misunderstanding of the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible wants you to pay compensation for that loss. So they switch it from a physical interpretation to a monetary interpretation. So in terms of your question, the rabbis, for example, create this idea and this explanation that all of human existence is a debate between the wicked impulse that every human being has and the good impulse that every human being has. They're born concomitantly. So in Hebrew, since some of my predecessors have been speaking the technical terms from their own religious traditions language, it's called the Yetzer Ra and the Yetzer Tov. This literally means in Hebrew, the impulse to do good and the impulse to do bad. And all of life is a struggle to between these two inborn tendencies. And of course, I'm generalizing radically, but the rabbis say that the more you study and the more you try to learn, the more likely, and of course, that means in traditional Jewish talk, that means, you know, following the laws and the traditions, the more likely it will be that you'll follow the good impulse. And the other thing I'll just say, and with this I'll pause because we have so much to cover. Again, anyone who knows anything about the rabbis know that their writings, which are voluminous, their writings expand over many volumes and so forth. One of the most famous is probably the Talmud, which is contained within something like 18 or 19 volumes. It's like an encyclopedia. And the point I want to make here is that very interesting is that in their debates over all sorts of things, over the law, over morality and so forth, the ancient rabbis preserve both the majority opinion and the minority opinion. So the debate is fully elucidated in the text. And even if they come to a conclusion and they say, oh, well, this is the way things are done, this is the law, or so forth, the minority point of view is always preserved. And this is why, I always tell people why the Eternal One's first name for the Jewish people, which is in the Bible, is, the Am Kshe Oref, which in Hebrew translates as often in English is translated as a stiff-necked people. I like to translate it as we can be a pain in the neck. And the reason is because all of the tradition is filled with debate and arguing about what's the right way. Well, if you stop and think about that, you realize, well, that is in and of itself the embrace of the complexity of the world, and that that answers in this life are not simple, and that it's not possible to just come up with one answer, and not everybody has the answer and the correct point of view. And so the rabbinic tradition, this ancient tradition, really reflects that in the way things are presented. Anna, I'll stop there for now.
Thank you for that answer, Gary. And Geneva, back to you.
So now we have a question for all of our panelists. One of the ways religious traditions transmit wisdom is through narrative. Rather than offering simple formulas, they invite us to learn from the lives of people who struggled, questioned, failed, and discerned. So I invite whoever wants to answer first to address this question. What stories or figures within your respective traditions serve as resources in navigating moral complexity? Don't all start at once.
Well, as long as I'm talking, I'll keep talking. I mean, first of all, I mean, if you have even again a familiarity, vague familiarity with the Quran or with the Christian Bible or with the Hebrew Bible, these are just filled with stories and examples of human beings and their experiences in the world. And I'll let my other colleagues talk about their own tradition. This is where the rabbis, again, I'm jumping from the Hebrew Bible, although we all know the Hebrew Bible. I mean, think about the stories. I mean, everybody knows the stories are not just heroic stories, right? They're not just about, these wonderful, patriarchs and matriarchs who do everything beautifully. And I mean, they're filled with all sorts of flaws and errors. And that's what, in a sense, in my opinion, that's what makes this literature great, is because it is a reflection of our own humanity to this very day. Some of the things that we see in the Bible, recounted the fighting. I mean, you start with this beautiful idea that we are all related, we're all connected because we all come from the same two parents, right? And what a beautiful idea. This is to me the meaning of this is one of the beautiful ideas in the Hebrew Bible. But what do we learn right after that is that brothers kill one another. So, I mean, it follows. Now, well, I love to tell this story, but there's a lot of things that the Bible leaves us questions and we don't have answers to. So the rabbinic literature is filled with stories about human beings and in an effort to explain complexities that are in the Hebrew Bible. One of my favorites. So, I think all Americans know the story about George Washington and the cherry tree, right? And in fact, I teach history, so I'm sorry to say that there are some people who really believe that that's really a true story. That the famous story that George Washington couldn't tell a lie. He chopped down his father's cherry tree. Well, we don't have any documentary evidence that that really happened, but still, it's a famous story that helps to explain what that Washington was so honest. There was an honest impulse. So one of the stories I love, which really relates to all three of the Western religious traditions, is because we're all connected through Abraham, and the question is, how come Abraham became a monotheist? In other words, the Bible doesn't really explain that. The Bible doesn't tell us why did Abraham decide to become, this conceive of this idea that there's one source of the universe to which we're all connected. Where did that come from? It's not explained in the Bible. So the rabbis come up with a story that's very famous, and it's so famous that many times Jews think it's actually in the Bible, but it's not. It's made up, just like the George Washington story. And the story goes like this, and it's in the Talmud. It's a Talmudic, it's a rabbinic story, that Abraham's father was an idol worshiper, and he sold idols. He made idols. And one day the father decides to go into town to go shopping, and he says to his son Abraham, he says, Abraham, please look after the shop, watch the idols, and if anybody comes and wants to buy an idol, sell it to him. And so the rabbis continue, the father leaves, and Abraham is sort of playing with the idols. And, he's a kid, and he's, got him, he's probably playing war or something. And oh my God, some of the idols break and they're destroyed. And the father comes back and is angry with Abraham and says, Abraham, what happened to all these, the product, that we're selling these idols to people who come by? And Abraham says, this is a famous line, he says, Dad, you won't believe this. When you left, the idols started to fight with one another. And the one God said, I'm greater than you are. The other God said, no, I'm greater than you. And before you know it, there was a full-fledged war going on here. and they struggled with each other and they destroyed one another. So the father says, don't tell me that. That's ridiculous. They're made out of stone. And then the final line is, Abraham says, well, if they're made out of stone, how can they be God? See, and this is a legend that is so powerful that some people actually think it's part of the holy literature, just like the Washington story. But it's a great example of how we continue to use stories about human beings and their struggles in order to help us to understand the purpose of human existence.
Thank you, Dr.
Just-
Zola.
Just to follow up,
Go ahead.
just to follow up on Gary's statements, the Christian Testament is filled with stories, as you all know. We call them parables, and Jesus was a great storyteller. We all know the story of the Good Samaritan. We all know the story of the prodigal son. We all know the story of the man who threw a banquet, who wanted to fill his table with everyone, a diverse and inclusive table. If you want to know where Jesus stood on issues of morality, just read Matthew 5 from his Beatitudes, where the poor are the first thing he talks about. Matthew has it. Jesus saying that blessed are the poor in spirit, but I like Luke's version better, where he is very clear and says, "Blessed are the poor." Period. So we have that moral clarity coming through in Jesus' parables and stories. Out of my own tradition, there is one that I believe is a model for moral clarity, and that's John Woolman. John Woolman's journal. This is an 18th century Quaker. His journal can be found in volume 1 of the Harvard Classics. Charles Lamb, who is president of Harvard, who put that 5-foot shelf together of classics, said of John Woolman, "Get the writings of John Woolman by heart." By heart is really the only way that you can get the writings of John Woolman. Because he is one who was able to discern where things were immoral and taught morality in a way that is very powerful. He would travel among Quakers in the South, Quakers who held slaves in North Carolina. And if they held slaves and he stayed at their home, he would leave money on the table when he left that house to pay the slaves for their labor. Very quiet, very, very humble. But it was an act showing that he disagreed with what the owners of these slaves stood for and what they were doing. He had a dream a very vivid dream where he saw massive matter to the south and the east, and he saw that they were people in great misery. And the moral clarity that came out of that dream was, he says, I was mixed with them, and I could no longer consider myself a distinct or separate being. Now, that's a very, very high form of spirituality to find. Thomas Merton writes about this when he's on a street in Louisville, Kentucky, where he recognizes that he's mixed with all of those others on those streets in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. You have our John Donne talking about no man is an island, no person is an island. We're all part of the main. And so if the church bell rings and you ask, well, who died? He's saying, don't ask who died. It tolls for you because a little bit of you has died. And so there is this, I think that through the years, Quakers have produced a number of persons who provide that kind of moral clarity in the midst of complexity. But John Woolman certainly stands at the front of the line in all of those. And before him, of course, Jesus, who shared that clear morality within his stories.
Thank you so much, Jim. Shakila or Raj, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I can go. Uh, how to discern the right action? At a philosophical level, it is addressed in what are called Upanishads. They are the latter parts of the Vedic literature. But they are deeply philosophical. And there are two epics, very large, very well known. One is Ramayana, a story of King Rama, and the other is Mahabharata. Mahabharata is it's about 100,000 verses and almost 1.8 million words. And Bhagavad Gita is only one chapter of that. And that's about a war that takes place between two clans to capture the power. And in Mahabharata, every decision is a moral dilemma. So there's no good side, no bad side. So you read it from beginning to end, and every situation uh, is this problem of there are many options, all of them are right from different perspective. Which one should I choose? I should choose the one which will preserve the harmony in cosmos for the largest sections of society and for the longest time. So reading that epic, that's a minefield of analyzing the moral dilemmas. So a simple example as to what one's responsibility in society is at a time and how that changes the moral action. So in Ramayana, there's a king Ram, his wife is abducted by another king, Ravan. So he wages a war, kills the king, destroys his kingdom, and rescues his wife. So he did all that damage to that kingdom. A few years later, the same person is the king. Earlier, he was a prince. Now he has become the king. He is responsible for his entire kingdom. And in the kingdom, there are questions about his wife's chastity, and they are just questions. He knows she's fine, but for the proper functioning of the kingdom, these questions should not arise about the king. And he decides, he asks his wife to leave the palace because keeping harmony in the kingdom is more important than keeping harmony in his family. So that is the level at which level you are, what responsibility you have, that determines the moral action. And both these epics are full of these stories, especially Mahabharata, from beginning to the last, hundreds of examples of moral dilemma.
Thank you, Raj. Shakila?
Thank you. So, navigate in Islam, navigating moral complexity is often framed through the tensions between the limitations that we have as human beings and then what you seek or want to see as divine justice, or there's not an alignment quite often. And so figures and stories, whether it be through the Quran, whether it be through the Sunnah or the traditions of the Prophet or historical context, kind of help to paint the nuances, all of the gray spaces, because things are not always black and white, and the importance of ethical deliberation. So the two that particularly, there are many, but two that just for me, one being challenging to understand, and then the second is just as an example for really all of us. And the first being the story of Prophet Musa and the sage Al-Qadr in the chapter of the Quran, Surah Kaf, chapter 18. And, the sage Al-Qadr is this mysterious sage who commits seemingly atrocious acts, like sinking a boat when there's people who need to be fed and, need the food and fish, and killing a young man, and repairing a wall for ungrateful and evil villagers. And each action, in a way, defines the standard moral rules that, we are to live by. but then in deeper divine wisdom and then reflection as humans, you understand that, there are things that are beyond our comprehension. So whether it be saving the villagers and the boat from tyrants, whether it's saving humanity and parents of the young person, whether it be, the good that will be for future young generations as a result of building the wall over, treasure and such. So it's really, I think, trying to understand through those stories both our limitations and God's ability. And so we're challenged along the way. And one of the stories that I often reference, sadly, a lot of, and not Amy, but a lot of scholars will not share the story of the Albanian rescuers during the Holocaust, and how, because of their cultural and moral code of Islamic, religious code of Besa, or, to keep the promise of safeguarding the stranger, they not only preserved the life of the 200 people that were within their community, but then the community grew tenfold as a result of their hospitality, their welcoming, their commitment to their faith of Islam. So I think there are many, many lessons and stories from which we can learn, I think, but it involves both understanding our limitations and having enough humility to understand that we don't have all the answers, and that we need some, divine guidance sometimes as well, often as well.
Thank you, Shakila. That was such a great answer. And we're going to move on to our final question for each panelist, but I'd also like to invite each of you to submit the names of the books and the stories that you mentioned in your answers, so those of us who are interested can go back and reference them. But for the final question, we'll start with Jim. How does your tradition cultivate empathy for one another's suffering and sustain solidarity across disagreement?
My first response is from the Apostle Paul, who says in Corinthians chapter 12, when one suffers, we all suffer. Okay. If you read the Christian Testament, you'll see that there's one theme which runs throughout the Testament, and that is that we're members one of another. We believe in community, right? So if one member suffers, we all suffer together. And so that builds an empathy within us when we come to that recognition. And as I said earlier, come to the recognition, as John Donne came to that recognition, that no person is an island, that we are members one of another. Zorba the Greek, I share this because I saw Gary was going to be on this panel, and I wanted to find something from Zorba. Zorba the Greek tells of an old neighbor he knew as a child. One day he took me on his knee and placed his hand on my hand as though he were giving me his blessing. Alexis, he said, I'm going to tell you a secret. You're too small to understand now, but you'll understand when you're bigger. Listen, little one, neither the 7 stories of heaven nor the 7 stories of earth are enough to contain God. But a person's heart can contain God. And so be very careful, Alexis, and may my blessing go with you, never to wound a person's heart. And I think that should be our goal in any community, any beloved community. We can have disagreements. We have them at Cincinnati Friends Meeting periodically, not a lot of disagreements, but we have some. And it's a matter of trying to separate the disagreement from the person in the community who you can still love in disagreement. And if you do accidentally wound a person's heart, it's something that you can first of all apologize for and say that was never my intention, and be tender with your disagreements, and recognize that perhaps the most the thing that bothers me in today's world is certainty. That people are so certain of their beliefs, that people are so certain about where they stand on various issues, that there's little room for doubt, which I have all the time. I don't know how people can live without doubt. But they do. Howard Thurman used to conclude his sermons by saying, I don't know, it may be. And then he'd sit down. A true humble spirit. And we need more of that today, that humility of recognizing that we can't be right all of the time. And I remember a dinner party where a friend of mine was listening to a man at the table who was telling all of what he believed and was very strong about his certainties. And his wife tells him, or speaks out and says to the man, I wish I could be as certain about anything as you are about everything. And it's a recognition that, you know what, and this comes with age and experience too. As I reach my 77th year, we become more humble in what we know and what we believe, recognizing that, yes, we may be wrong.
Thank you, Tim.
So this one is for both Shakila and Raj. Could you tell us what moral courage looks like in your respective traditions when certainty is unavailable and every available choice carries ethical costs? Shakila, would you like to go first?
Yes. Welcome to my life. But it is really important for me to remember before I tell anyone else is that, there are a number of things that must factor into exhibiting what we believe is moral courage. And there are definite principles in Islam that must be kept in mind. And I think they're human principles that can be applied as American principles, as principles across faith, and so on and so forth. So in the interest of time, I will focus on specifically those things that I think, based on just my reading and understanding, have come up is, number one, is that every time we make a decision, every time we're asked to show courage, are we minimizing harm? Are we doing better than what we have the opportunity to do, which would cause more harm? And so sometimes, it's very instinctive to just do what we think is right, because out of anger, out of fear, out of ignorance, whatever the case is. But, the higher objective is to guide our ethical decision making, prioritizing the preservation of faith, life, intellect, lineage, and even property. The second thing that my husband and I constantly discuss, because I'm asked to do so many different things in the community, is that, what is the intention? What is the niyyah? And that, your niyyah should be for, as Raj put it, for betterment of the cosmos, betterment of the world that we all share, betterment for not just my children, but everyone else's children. And so my intention will speak volumes to the courage that I truly exhibit. And I know that more than anybody else, and must keep that in mind. Embracing humility. We've talked about this throughout the session, in the sense that we don't have all the knowledge. Our foresight is very limited. And so moral courage involves doing one's utmost to weigh the ethical costs and then relying on divine grace, the ability to, achieve a positive result is really going to be in the end, not always in our hands. And then the last, which I think is easier for some people than others, but is something that I think I am very compelled to do, and I believe others are, is speaking truth to power. One of the highest forms of courage in Islam is upholding justice and speaking the truth, even when it endangers personal interests. And it is extremely challenging times, and it is so hard for us to discern through all of the false information, the lies, the attacks, whatever the case might be. But in the end, I feel if at minimum, I go through looking all of these aspects of what, Islam requires of me and what I require of myself, then I will discern to speak truth to power whenever I am able. And so, without fear of risk of retaliation or whatever the case might be. So it's a journey in progress. And I will say that every major obstacle, every major situation is not something that can be taken or should be taken lightly. I think that discernment is something that should become innate and part of the way that we approach our life and the challenges that we face, and appreciation for all the good.
Thank you so much, Shakila. Raj?
Yeah. So when you have choices to make, one side is the maintaining maximum harmony in the universe, in the cosmos, for the larger society. And on the other side, the other choices may be my personal benefit, benefit to my community, my attachments, my friends, my relatives. So the courage is transcending these fears or these uh, personal benefits, transcending all of them and then choosing the rightest path. That's what the courage is. I said the story of Arjuna. He had the choice between waging a war with his cousins and his teachers. On the other side was the larger righteousness. So that's what Krishna tells him. You have to transcend all these attachments and then go take the right action. That's where the courage is. And there are too many examples in Mahabharata and everywhere. And everywhere this is said, transcend the fears, transcend your personal preferences, transcend the lower level benefits for the larger level benefits to the humanity and the universe.
Thank you, Raj. Amy, I'm going to hand it over to you for the final question.
Thank you, Eva. So our last question is for Gary. How does your tradition's sense of time impact the sense of urgency or necessity in addressing morally complex situations?
Well, this is really an easy question because in the rabbinic writings is a very, very famous phrase that I think to which we can all subscribe. It's found in a section of the Talmud, which is called the sayings of our forebears. And this is a well-known and often quoted section of the Talmud because it largely contains moralistic assertions. And this famous phrase comes from a rabbi from the 1st century by the name of Rabbi Tarfon. That was his name. And he famously says, "It is not your duty to complete the work, but neither is it, neither do you have the liberty to desist from it or to neglect it. And that's really the balance that we all struggle in our life, meaning you can't live your life and say, well, let somebody else do it. This is a big thing, and I'll never complete it in the course of my life, so let's let it go. Big things like making the world a better place will I will assert that all of our good intentions from all the people who are listening to this podcast, this webinar, all of us will never get to the goal we're seeking in the course of our life. But that does not, according to Rabbi Tarfon, give us the permission to just walk away from it because it's difficult or because it's it's something we cannot complete. That's the given. I wanted to also add, I hope that answer is, to me that epitomizes this answer of the question, of time and the urgency of trying to do something, but knowing you'll never fully complete it. But I wanted to add one thing to Reverend Newby's beautiful comments about having humility and not having all the answers, and Jim, since you confessed your age, in our tradition we wish you till 120 because Moses lived to be 120. But most everybody knows that a Jewish house has what's called, almost all Jewish homes have an amulet on the doorpost. It's called a mezuzah. And most people have seen it. You can go into see a Jewish home and the amulet, and one thing I want to draw your attention to, and this is following up on what Reverend Newby said, is that the amulet, the mezuzah, is always at a diagonal, is a diagonal. It's not positioned vertically and it's not positioned horizontally. And what most people do not know, even many, many Jews, is there was a debate long ago in the Talmud about that very positioning. In other words, we had one famous scholar, I won't go into their names, though I could, who says when you put your mezuzah up, it's supposed to be vertical because it is representative of our tradition and it should stand tall from head to toe. And then another scholar disagrees with him and says that, oh no, it's doing something like that is completely wrong. The law should be horizontal because all human beings are on the same level. And ultimately, of course, there's the compromise. And that's, to this day, this goes back really to the 12th century, the compromise, that when you put that mezuzah up, you put it up on an angle. And that's to try to find a way to gather together as many as you can. I want to, I was very taken by Dr. Karen Armstrong's book on the Golden Rule. If you haven't read it or looked at it, you might consider doing so. What she really is saying is that every single religious tradition from the East or the West, that's really at the heart of it all. That's what Jesus says. That's what Rabbi Hillel says. If it's hurt, it would be hurtful to you. Don't do it to someone else. And Rabbi, excuse me, well, I just ordained you, Jim. Reverend Newby said it so beautifully, very movingly, that, you know, a little humility, a little ability to listen to someone else, the ability to say, well, you know, on this we don't agree, but we still have the common parentage. All of that is worth our effort, even if we can't complete it in the course of a lifetime.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zola. So we are about at time, but I want to open it up in case anyone does have a question or comment they'd like to make before we end the call. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question or make comments, I welcome you now to raise your hand or put it in the chat. I haven't seen any questions come in the chat, but I just want to give an opportunity before we close. Okay, not seeing or hear. Oh, okay, Amy, you have a question.
I had one question arise during these wonderful presentation and answers. I was wondering, this is open to each or all of you, how does your tradition encourage its believers to navigate these morally complex situations with the necessary risk tolerance and courage that's required to move through them?
I can, we would love the answer to that, Amy, because we all need it. So, but I think it is something that we have to think about constantly because we're faced with that challenge almost on a daily basis. And so that's people from outside of the community who are trying to bring you down and, you know, malign and sometimes people within the community because of their own pain and difficulties, just have a lack of, you know, understanding and tolerance about where you stand. So I think for me, it's really sometimes comes down to seeking as much knowledge as possible so I can speak truth to power and can, you know, check myself and not fall into the instinctive responses. And then I honestly seeking prayer and guidance. You know, I don't think, you know, probably if those are who are parents, I don't think there's anything that we pray more for than our children. But I think we're at a time where we really, I feel I need to pray for other people's children and I need to pray for humanity and that, you know, that everyone is able to achieve some level of guidance in order to be a fellow human being. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think, you know, knowledge and prayer, along with a lot of other compassion.
Thank you, Shakila.
Did anyone else want to respond to Amy's question?
Well, so there one very quick comment. So in Bhagavad Gita, one message which is impressed very strongly is you have your right to do the correct action, select the action, but what are the consequences or the rewards of that? That is not up to you, that's up to the universe. So detach yourself from the consequences and just do the right action. That's what your limitation is. So that's what teaches you the detachment, and the risk tolerance comes from that.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have anything to add, or do we have any other final questions or comments from anyone in the audience?
Let me just follow up on Gary's mention of Karen Armstrong. She said one time we had her where I was a minister in Wayzata, Minnesota. We had her come and speak on that book on the Golden Rule. And one of the statements that she made that stayed with me is that if there is a theme which runs throughout all of the different faith traditions, it is compassion. And if you have compassion, that's a wonderful place to begin to heal disagreements and to heal division and to wash over this terrible tribalism which has developed within our world today. George Fox, the founder of the Society of Friends, once said, yes, there is an ocean of darkness, but there is an ocean of light which flows over the ocean of darkness. And it's on that ocean of light that we all need to focus.
Thank you, Jim. Has anyone else had? I don't know if Dr. Zolfi wanted to add anything.
I of course always do, but I'm going to now. I'm going to exhibit model what we've been all talking about, and that's to model self-control and say that not everybody has to say the same thing again and again. So I'll end here. But thank you very much, and thanks. It's always a pleasure to be with the colleagues who are on this panel.
Thank you. Well, I think that's a beautiful way to end our call about discernment. And so I thank you all for your time, for being here. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to my co-moderator. And I encourage you to visit the Interfaith Center's website at oxfordinterfaithcenter.org and attend some of our other upcoming programs. So thank you all again, and enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world.
Thank you. Great to be with all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.